Nikola Jokic is going to win MVP again. So let's talk about it. This is Locked On Nuggets. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. I'm Matt Moore, senior NBA writer for the Action Network. Thanks for making this part of your week, part of your day, part of your playoff week. There's so much to get to. But today, just me today, just got me. We're going to do something a little bit different. And we're just going to talk about Nikola Jokic's MVP because it's something that I care a lot about, which is the MVP race. I just finished and published my Action Network article, which is a definitive case for Nikola Jokic for MVP. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what Nikola did this season and why I feel that he is the MVP, why I recommended him to voters that have asked. If they've said, who would you vote for? I've said Nikola Jokic. We'll talk about why and more on today's show. Later this week, there's a practice tomorrow. We'll have coverage of that practice tomorrow night. Adam and I will break that down. And there'll probably be a practice the next day as well. So lots of Nugget stuff to come, lots of stuff for the playoffs. But I did not want to let the season slip by without a discussion of Nikola. I do want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Check out PrizePicks.com and use promo code NBA, or go to the App Store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Let's talk about Nikola. All right, so there's been a lot of the MVP discussion has been pretty toxic this year, and there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, I think you can look at maybe it's Philly. That's mostly what it is. I don't. There are certain fan bases. Look, they're not the only one. Houston fans got really mad when I had Giannis over Harden. They were super pissed about it, despite the fact that I voted for Harden in 2017 and said that he had to win in 2018. Not enough. And people are always going to cape for their guy, and there's just different identities that certain fan bases take on. And look, Nuggets fans have been just as adamant as anybody. Like they are well versed in the memos of this, that, and the other. What I think is interesting for me when we talk about the MVP and this discussion of it has been, and I wrote about this in the article, was about the advanced analytics and why those numbers have been so maligned. And here's really the problem that I wanted to kind of talk about. The advanced metrics, whether it's value over replacement player, PER, EPM, which is the one that I put the most stock in at this point. You can find that at dunksandthrees.com. Jokic leads by a lot. BPM, win shares, LeBron, Raptor, all these different advanced metrics. They're all flawed. They're all flawed. They all have certain biases because when you're trying to weight statistical values in a formula and you're not just adding them together, right? If you're weighting anything in a formula, you're going to wind up with a certain amount of discrepancy in terms of you have to have some discretion in what you're valuing. And that was really like what I think has been the worst part of these conversations. Like it's the lack of understanding that the context is baked in. It's assuming that the voters that put any stock towards these metrics whatsoever are oblivious to them. Like there's been this discussion this week, like, well, defensive BPM is a really bad stat. And it's like, okay, I understand. Like I get the reasons why you're probably gonna be flawed. It says that Nikola is the best defender in the league, twice as good as Embiid. That's clearly not true. See, you could just throw it out. Then that's not the way this works, right? So I wrote about this a little bit. Defensive win shares is Jokic's number one in the league. Guess what defensive win shares does? It values rebounds. If you go through and you actually look at the formula, it values rebounds. Jokic had the 12th best defensive rebounding season of all time for 100 possessions. If you slow it down for pace, if you adjust everything for pace, Nikola had the 12th most rebounds for 100 possessions in NBA history since we were able to start tracking possessions, I think roughly 1974. So yeah, he's going to show up pretty well in these metrics, in these defensive metrics, if these metrics value rebounds. But you also can't just be like, well, those are just rebounds, because rebounds do matter. I'm actually not a rebounds guy. I've always been kind of like, look, I care about if your team gets the rebound. I don't actually care how much you get the rebound. I care more about the overall effect, right? But Nikola's an insane rebounder. Like, he's just a remarkable one. He's averaging 14 this season, like over 13 a game. That's crazy. And furthermore, with these metrics, it's not that Jokic is good at them or he's good in most of them. It's that he's number one in all of them by a margin. Player efficiency rating was invented by John Hollinger when he worked at ESPN. And the whole concept was basically trying to figure out, what does a guy contribute on the floor in the minutes that he's on the floor? Like, how much does he contribute in terms of efficient production? Like, you're making the most of the time, right? You're efficient in it's more of a production stat than it is actually an efficiency metric. Like, efficiency is true shooting, which also Nikola Jokic is the best amongst the candidates at. But PER is going to have these flaws. Like, PER doesn't cover defense. I know. I'm aware of that. Anybody that looks at these is aware of that. If you value these things, it's because you've taken enough time to understand them. Like, I've taken enough time to understand these metrics. And I have a good sense of what they do value and what they don't. I've noticed the trends where certain players pop up and are rewarded in some places and they're not in others. And at the end of it, this is what was really funny. I had someone argue that, well, all these are kind of offshoots of plus minus. And so if you value plus minus, then maybe that's your problem. I will just break this down. The reason that I started to care a lot about plus minus over the last couple of years is when I framed it this way. Plus minus is literally, how much do you win by? That's it. Do you win your minutes? Do you outscore the opponent in the minutes that you're on the floor? You can do that by being an amazing defender so nobody can score. You can do that by being an amazing offensive player and putting up 120 points per 100 possessions. You can do it in a combination of balance of both, which are the most impressive to me. But at its core, it's, do you win? And that's the basis for a lot of these metrics. And guess what? Nikola Jokic wins. He wins his minutes. He won his minutes by more per 100 possessions than any other player in the MVP race did. Those are team stats, right? Team stats. Which is why it's all the more impressive, and that's where the conversation becomes about the players that were missing and the players that Jokic had. And we'll talk about that when we come back after the break. But first, I want to tell you about Prize Picks. If you're looking for a daily fantasy option for NBA, you've got to try Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy made easy. I love it, and you're going to too. You just pick 2 to 5 players and over/under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. I took Kyrie Irving over 6.5 assists and Bruce Brown over 13.5 points, and both of those cashed in the Nets win over the Cavs on Tuesday night. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Prize Picks is safe and offers fast withdrawals, and you can use the app on both Google Play and the App Store. They offer any prop you can think of. Points scored, rebounds being important, steals. And you can mix them with other sports like college basketball, college football, NFL, MLB's back. You can parlay in with the Rockies, soccer, MMA, and more. For a limited time, Prize Picks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for our users. Users get $50 for free if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point, but you got to use code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. Sign up today and use the code NBA to get $50 for free if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point. Prize Picks, it's daily fantasy made easy. We're also brought today by Bet Online, your number one source for all your sports betting stats and info. You can find all the latest sports development, league reviews, and news, including this year's baseball playoffs, basketball playoffs, and the start of, obviously, Major League Baseball as well. Bet Online is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoff, esports, and more. I had a great night on Tuesday. I had the Wolves money line. I had the Nets, as I talked about. I had a really good Tuesday night. I will tell you, I've gone ahead and I've bet the Warriors -1.5 on the win spread. I'm just going to go ahead and get out ahead of this. I think the Warriors are going to win the series. It's probably going to be pretty short. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for making this part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Make your second listen Locked On now. It's got nightly recaps of all the NBA action across the league from our panel of local hosts. Check it out wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. It's Locked On now. Okay, second segment here on Locked On Nuggets for a Wednesday, breaking down Nikola Jokic and his MVP case. So if we look at this and we start from the concept, when I built out my MVP case a couple of years ago, every voter, I think, has to answer this question. And I will say this, not enough voters do this. You have to answer what's the first question is, what does valuable mean? You cannot go any further and you can define it however you want. We can disagree, right? You could say, well, valuable means they won the most games. Okay, that's a very basic evaluation, but at least it's sound. And if you work from that, you're probably going to come up with Devin Booker, and that's okay. I don't agree, but we don't have to agree. That's a sound reasoning. I came out with this. Who is most impactful towards their team winning? Right? Because a lot of teams win, but they share that credit. That's how I feel about the Suns. They share credit. They're all really good. They're all really disciplined. They're all extremely versatile. And Devin Booker has been the best among them, but their success is due to how good all of them are. Who has been most impactful toward their team winning? Who has done the most? Who has carried the heaviest crown? And that's why, for me, that net rating winds up being like a huge part of the equation. Is I want to know, how much did you win by? Okay, because that impacts if you were impactful. If I can look at the numbers and the game, watch the clips, watch the games. If I watch these games and I go, that guy led them to wins, and I feel like he led them to the most wins. Okay, but I need to know exactly this: how much did you win by? Because there's a lot of guys that win. You can't just look at win percentage because there's a lot of context there in terms of the schedule and everything else. And you factor all that in too. You can be, I would theoretically vote for a candidate with a lower net rating. Like Jason Tatum had the best net rating in the league this season amongst qualified leaders. Wouldn't vote for Jason Tatum. You know why? The Celtics are really good in a lot of areas. Jason Tatum wasn't more impactful towards his team winning than Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, or Giannis Antetokounmpo was. So you look at it and you say, all right, how much did you win by? So you start there. And then you factor in what he had to work with. And this is where it gets difficult for me, because I came upon this concept a couple of years ago. It was in the 2017 race, because the argument was from Thunder fans, look at the guys that Russ has. Look at this team. This is not a very good team, and he's got them in the playoffs. And that was used to cover up the fact that the record wasn't as good. And the same thing is being used for Nikola now, that, well, look at this team that he's got. Like, he's going to win this award based on this premise, guys. I'm just letting you know right now that there are voters that will recognize his statistical accomplishments or his impact on the game, or just they've watched him and been like, that dude was the MVP. That's all fine and good. There's going to be a lot of voters that are just going to vote for him because Jamal was out, MPJ was out, and the rest of the team sucked. That's just reality. It's like, that's what they're going to get to. The conversation, the talking point is, look at this roster. Look at this team. And the problem I had when we go back to this is that if we compare two players, let's go back to 2017. If I look at Russ and I look at Harden, one, with the benefit of hindsight, that team had Victor Oladipo and Steven Adams and like Domas and bonus. Like, that Thunder team had a lot of talent in 2017. That's ironic, but true. But if we look at these two teams, right? Should an MVP have bad teammates? Does that sound like an MVP? Like, does that sound like the most valuable player that his teammates looked bad and he looked good? No, that's not what you would think. Like, I would think, in my personal opinion, I would think that an MVP is somebody who raises people up, that he's a tide that lifts all boats. This is the biggest problem I've honestly had with Nikola Jokic's candidacy this season. This is why I was very close to being a Giannis guy. I don't have a vote. I might have one again in the future, but I switched outlets. I had one at CBS and then I changed jobs, and they go by outlet. But I take it very seriously. And so I almost went Giannis, and one of the reasons was because if Jokic is most valuable, and the reason he's most valuable is he lifts everybody up and he carries everybody and he makes everybody better, and look at the net rating and all of these things, and you still watch the team and you're like, God, this team sucks. And I got there by the end of the year. I fought it. I fought the good fight, and I lost. I lost to Nuggets fans who convinced me that their team was bad, which is an interesting thing, but true. Okay, if that's the case, how much did he actually raise them? Did Nikola Jokic, is Will Barton like the worst NBA player on earth? And Jokic raised him to looking like just a bad one? Is Austin Rivers or Monte Morris, are all these guys just bad players that Jokic raised up? That's where it gets tough. Is like, ultimately for this, what you're saying is Joel Embiid or Giannis Antetokounmpo don't win the MVP because the Denver Nuggets did not add enough talent to their roster. That's like the end point of that conversation. Of that, if you carry this out to the extreme, that's where you get to. Is Giannis didn't win because Tim Connelly didn't add enough talent to the roster when they got hurt. Is that a reason for a guy to win MVP or lose it? No, that's clearly not true. That doesn't hold any sort of logical sense. And how I came to square it was this, was Jokic was still most impactful because they still won the games. They still won those minutes. They still had the net rating. They didn't win as many games when he played as when Embiid or Giannis did. That was Embiid's like big. That was the big. I always wonder in my brain, the people that come to argue with me have been sent like a mailing list of like, it's on an email. It's like there's a newsletter every morning with like the MVP talking points. And like the 40 and 10 for Embiid was a big one late in the season because 2 weeks before the 40 and 10 thing, it was, well, they win more games with Embiid than with Joker, than the Nuggets do with Joker. That's true. The differences in the winning percentages were Giannis. Embiid won 65.6% of his games that he played this season. And when he played a minute, they won 65.6% of their games. The Nuggets won 62.2, a 3.4% differential. Over every 100 games, if you played 100 games, they would win 3.4 more games with Embiid on the floor than with Jokic based off of this model. Giannis was 67.8. That's why that number faded away in terms of the discussion, because if you took of the three candidates, who wins the most, the answer is Giannis. Giannis was the one that won the most games. And so what you have at the end of this is the net rating, which I think is better because it shows like, all right, if we just play these guys, because I did get to this point, and it's this is an evolution for me. I do care. This is why I don't care about the record, and I care about the net rating more. We know that early in the season, the Nuggets lost a bunch of games because of the bench unit. Just say that. I'm just going to just keep it the bench unit. The bench unit was so bad, and they lost these games. If they had not gotten over 500, I wouldn't have made an excuse for Jokic. Even if Jokic had a better net rating, if they were plus 15, but they were under 500, I would still be like, it doesn't matter. Like, if you were still under 500, you needed to be plus 30. Like, whatever it took, you would have had to do it. But Jokic did enough. Jokic did do enough in his minutes to get them to a record that was substantially over 500. That's what I cared about. And that differential between, the Nuggets record and the Sixers record just wasn't enough, especially in a season in which so many guys missed time. It was just really messed up. And so the injury result for me was, okay, it wasn't just that the roster was bad, because we don't think this roster is bad. We think I think we all agree, the roster's good when you have Jamal and MPJ, because everybody goes down 2 slots, and then it looks a lot better. Monte Morris is your backup point guard, and Will Barton's your 5th option, and Aaron Gordon's your 3rd option or 4th option, and Bones Highland is your 7th option. Like, everybody 2 slots down, and you're like, okay, this is a pretty good team. Honestly, it's probably a title contender. And so that context mattered to me, that they were literally deprived of what they should have been. And yet they still won by more. That to me was enough to consider the injuries. I still felt uncomfortable about it. I still didn't feel great about it. Because one, I just think it's a super, like, I do think a lot about how if you're a Nugget and you hear this, and the argument is, look at Jokic, you won with these guys. Like, you were part of the team that won 48 games too, right? Like, you contributed to those wins. You may not have played as well as Joker. You may not play as well as other guys. They were part of this, and they deserve credit for that. So I think about that a lot. But on the other hand of this is, what I won't do is I'm not going to punish Embiid or Giannis for having better teammates. One, Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton missed a ton of time early in the season, and nobody seems to talk about that. Like, they just want to talk about Ben Simmons being out. Embiid had a direct. impact on. But they just want to talk about Ben Simmons being out. And they don't want to talk about the fact that Drew and Chris missed a lot of games. And even when they would come back, like one of them would come back and the other would be out. And then the other one would come back and the other one would be out. Like they just traded back and forth throughout that season. This is why, again, Giannis and Jokic were close for me. It was razor thin. I flip-flopped like 4 times. I finally came around to saying Jokic based mostly off of the fact the Bucks defense fell off a little bit. When I did the deep dive for Giannis, I noticed, like, man, he had to play center a bunch this year, and that was hard on him defensively. And that was a huge edge for him, right? Because he's such a better defender than Jokic. I wrote in the article a lot about how good of a defender Jokic is. I wrote extensively about it. Jokic is great. Honestly, the guy that I came away most impressed with defensively, I thought it was going to be Jokic. I thought I was going to like find all this stuff. The guy I was most impressed with defensively was Embiid. I came away really impressed with what Joel Embiid has done this season defensively. I thought he was always a little bit overrated. He's really good. He got much better this season at a lot of the stuff I care about, which is playing at the level and these types of things. Part of it's that Jokic, I think it was impressive that Jokic was able to do the things that he couldn't do earlier. Like defensively, Nikola is all like we've talked so much about this. They asked him and he said, I want to play at the level, I want to attack. Because he was uncomfortable playing drop. He was good in drop this season. He was comparable to Embiid in drop. He was better than Embiid on switches this season. That's really impressive. Like per possession, not a lot of possessions. As you would probably imagine, the Nuggets don't love Nikola Jokic being on an island, but he did his job when he was out there, and that's all you can really ask, right? But I walked away being very impressed with Embiid. But when you look at it, it's just like the gap between Jokic and Embiid defensively is not enough for Embiid to win, and the gap between Jokic and Embiid offensively is so wide that you wind up being like, he's got to win. And that's really what it comes down to. It wasn't the metrics. It wasn't the PR or the VORP or the BPM. I do pay attention to those metrics. I think they matter. To me, it was that Nikola impacted the game in so many ways, on so many levels, and was so far ahead of everything. In so many categories, I did not know how to make any compelling enough argument for anyone else to get past him. And that's why he won MVP. Let's take a break. And when we come back, I actually want to talk a little bit about Jamal Murray and the situation that the Nuggets are in. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I need to tell you about Rock Auto, which is the best way for you to save parts on your car or truck. The local auto parts store is going to jack up prices for you. They're not going to have the part. They're going to have to call another store and say, can you bring this over, and wait for that truck to get there. And you're going to have to come back later in the afternoon, and they're going to jack you on the price. Don't do that. Just go to Rock Auto. Go to Rock Auto. It's at home and in your pocket. Go to rockauto.com, and you're going to save serious money getting the same parts. Like, okay, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353 from a chain store. It's just $216 from Rock Auto. $130 that you're going to save at Rock Auto on the same part. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. The prices are reliably low for every customer, and they've got everything you need from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today and find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How'd You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. We're also brought to you today by Effortless Rehab. Have you ever had your muscles rebooted yet? Research shows that whenever you have pain or an injury, some of your muscles shut off, and no amount of rehab and exercise will turn them on again. This is called muscle inhibition. This means that rehab is a process of trying to get your other muscles to take over for those that are inhibited. What ends up happening is that those muscles remain shut off, perhaps for the rest of your life. And this can cause muscle imbalance that can cause pain, joints wearing down, muscle tightness, reduced range of motion, more injuries, and poor performance. AMIT, Advanced Muscle Integration Technique, is a method that was used in the NBA for 23 years that reboots muscles. It immediately turns them back on. There are about 20 muscles to support every joint. If you have current pain or have ever been injured, you likely have 30 to 50% inhibited muscles in those areas. Dr. Robert Weisfeld specializes in the AMIT treatment and charges just $70 per joint area to do a basic reboot of all the muscles in one joint. Special tryout price, you get just $35 for one area. Go to effortlessrehab.com/appointments to make an appointment online or call 303-300-3933. That's 303 300-3933. AMIT Effortless Rehab, your fastest recovery ever. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for making us part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Thanks for joining me, Matt Moore. Final segment, Locked On Nuggets. We'll be back. I actually think Adam's going to go Wednesday night, and then we're going to do together on Friday. Is how we're going to do it. Lots of stuff going on this week with the playoffs. So, again, we have time to kind of get into the Warriors stuff. If you're looking for like the in-depth stuff on the Warriors, honestly, a lot of it's like we both want to be able to like do the research, do the deep dive, and give you the information. Even though, look, we're already getting it. Like, wow, you guys are really pessimistic. Look, I'm the guy that picked the Nuggets over the Clippers, right? Like, I have proven that I can be optimistic about Denver when it's called for. It's a bad spot. They're tired. If they dig down and they show it, I am in the spot of the Nuggets are going to have to prove it to me. I've liked this matchup theoretically. I do not like this matchup for where both teams are at. The Warriors seem like they're like, no one expects us. Everyone's counted us out. We're going to make a run. And the Nuggets seem like, dear God, please let us go take a rest. I just want to go to bed. That's all I want to do. I want to go to a beach and lay down for a while. It's been a hard couple of years for the Denver Nuggets. I want to talk about Jamal. I had someone text me tonight, and it's a person in the media, and they were basically like, Tim Connelly did a spot on The Fan, and he said it's 100% up to Jamal for him to come back. It's 100% up to him. And it was interesting because it showed the dichotomy between the fans I deal with and the fans that this person deals with. And what this person told me was that he was like, it seems like they were putting pressure on him. It's like, it's on him. It's on his shoulders. Because this person is outside of like the normal NBA discourse, which our discourse is, it's all on Jamal because Jamal gets to make whatever decision is best for him, and the team is never going to pressure or dictate anything to our special player. Because that's how you have to be in the NBA now. Otherwise, you lose these guys. Like, I'm going to be real with you. You have to kiss a lot of ass. You just do. I don't know what else to say. Like, I don't know how else to put this. Right? And look, I think there are players that you don't have to do that with. I think there are players that probably don't want to be treated like that. But you also can't risk in this injury situation, what you cannot risk is damaging that relationship. So when Tim Connelly goes on The Fan and Tim Connelly says it's on Jamal, Tim Connelly's not applying pressure, being like, we're hopeful that Jamal will make the decision to return. That's not what he's saying. He's saying if Jamal's ready to go, then we'll welcome him back. If he's not, he won't play. And that's okay. They're totally accepting if Jamal can't come back. This has sparked some discussion. Again, I'm very fascinated by this because there's like the Nuggets fans that listen to this show and that are like on Twitter, right? And Nuggets Twitter. And then there's the Nuggets fans that like I think exist in a more of a casual environment around the city. And what this casual fans that were basically like, is Jamal soft? So I just want to straighten this out. Jamal Murray is pretty much a badass. Look, the whole martial arts thing and meditation and all of that, it was entirely built on mental toughness. That's why I think he was so good in the bubble. Is that in that environment, there were so many guys that were distracted, and that mental adversity impacted their ability to play the game that they needed to. It was a simultaneous, I think, exercise of tests, right? Of who thrives in an environment of mental health adversity and who doesn't. And it doesn't make those other players less. The Clippers were not in a good place in the bubble. Like they've talked about. They were not in a good place. The Nuggets weren't in a good place, but they were built to thrive in that environment. In a normal environment, the Clippers might be better. We don't know. There's no way to answer that. We don't know what would have happened if they would have played outside of Orlando, right? But Jamal has kind of proven time and time again that he is kind of built for it. There was a lot, look, his early seasons were tough. I was the guy that was like, I think Jameer Nelson needs to start. He's better. Like I kept saying, I was like, I think Jameer Nelson needs to start. He's better. because my entire thing was when Jamal's there, he gets it. Like he gets the reins when he's gotten to that point, when he's climbed that mountain. And the Nuggets honestly got to a point where they were like, Jameer is too good. So we're going to get rid of Jameer and we're going to hope that Jamal gets there. And Jamal did. And there were some growing pains, but he got there. And there was a lot of adversity that he had to get through there. He was basically tasked with outplaying a very good veteran. And he didn't outplay him. I'll say that. Jameer never lost his job to Jamal. But he did enough to prove that he warranted it. And then when he got thrust into that role, he figured it out. It wasn't always pretty, but that makes it more impressive to me. Jamal's not soft. I'll say that. I will also tell you, like, I'm not like super in there with Jamal. You know, he and I had sat down for an interview once, and it was one of the worst ones I've done with the Nuggets. He was in a bad mood. I could tell that he was in a bad mood. He had very little time or respect for it. He could be better now. And I don't hold it against him. I've always said this. The players just have, like, if they agree to the interview, all they got to do is answer the questions. It's my job to ask the right ones. I think there's a lot that goes into this rehab process. I think the time that it's taken, I think there's probably some aspect of it there's a trust that players have talked about when they get injured. I try and think of injury a lot of times as trauma. And so I've asked some rehab therapists this question, and they've kind of agreed with this analogy. If you're in a car accident, you don't want to drive. You know, you just don't want to. Like, if you're in a bad car accident, getting back in a car again is tough. It's hard. And driving is tough. And there's a little bit of trauma there, right? It's a little bit of PTSD. It's not like PTSD the way, like, from the normal things that cause PTSD. What they've found about PTSD is that it does exist on a scale. It's just that everybody kind of deals with a little bit. And some people deal with it in very serious and meaningful ways from whatever life events they've incurred. So, like, do I think Jamal's soft? No. Do I think the mental side of this is where we're probably at? Probably. I think there's probably a little bit of the body doesn't respond the way that he wants, right? Like, you wake up in the morning and it's just not, he doesn't snap back like he was when he was 21. He's got miles on him. I go back and forth on, man, the emotional boost of if they're down 0-2 and Jamal comes off the bench when he walks to that scorer's table in that first quarter, what that's going to be like and how big of a rush that's going to be for the Nuggets, for the team. I go back and forth between that and just, like, is that ultimately going to be worth it? Like, is that enough to boost you to a win? Probably not, honestly, given the matchup. So I think, in part, I think one of the issues here is there was an idea of Jamal needed to come back from the injury, and then he could just go back. And he wouldn't be the same. It would take him a while, but it would be like out and then in. And it's becoming kind of apparent that maybe what need to happen is Jamal doesn't come back this season. Jamal goes through a full summer where he remembers what it's like being a professional basketball player, right? Goes to the pro-ams, goes to the summer runs at UCLA or wherever he goes, gets back in the gym with the Nuggets that are in town, goes through the whole thing. He'll be nervous going in, hits the ground running, and plays next season. That's probably, like, at this point, the optimum outcome. I've gone back and forth on whether it would be better or not for him to get his feet wet. And I don't honestly know that question. I'm not going to pretend to. What I will say is I think that on some level, the team may have collectively and individually reached a point of they kept waiting for everything to sync up and link into place, that they could get the right parts back together and they would figure out how to play. And then, Bones would take a step forward and all these types of things. And it would all kind of sync up at the right time. And it would make for the opportunity. It would open a path for a run. And that just didn't happen. What sucks is they're going to have to go through the whole thing again. Like, that to me is the biggest bummer if they do not surprise me and beat this Warriors team, if they do not go on a playoff run. What sucks is you go through the entire summer and you're right back at it. And it's game 1 of an 82-game season. That's rough. They've gone through what they've gone through in the last 3 years and be like, oh, another 6-month run, another 9-month run you're trying to make. But ultimately, that's the job. And that's why this is the hard part. Honestly, like, finding Jokic was the hard part as a foundational piece. And finding him in the second round is crazy. That's the hard part, is getting the guy. There is this idea, though, that once you get the guy, everything is easy. And I don't think that's true. I just don't. I think you have to find the guy, and then you also have to get the right guys around him, and they did that. And then you also got to get the circumstances to be right. You have to avoid all the things that happen to good teams. There's a lot of good teams that could have won titles, and they didn't. And the Nuggets, unfortunately, this season, I would define them as such. They were a good team that could have won the title, and things didn't work out for them. This is fatalist, given that they were just entering the playoffs. But I wanted to communicate mostly that things not working out isn't anyone's fault. It's not a failure. It's not on the training staff. Look, I've been critical of the training staff. I'm going to continue to be critical of the training staff. Not a big fan over here. Don't know why they keep having core injuries. Didn't have many this year. It's not them. It's not the front office. It's not the coaching staff. It's not Jamal. Bad things just happen to good teams. That happens sometimes. But there's a playoff series to be played, and we'll have it all covered for you here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining me, everybody, and listening. I really appreciate it. Look, I know sometimes that I'm not the most popular guy. I'm not Adam. I tell this to Adam all the time. Like, I am aware. Like, I tell Adam all the time how great he is for the community and how he's like, if Monte Morris is the Nuggets player that's Mr. Nugget, Adam Mares is the media guy that's Mr. Nugget to me. And he's great, and he's phenomenal, and his takes are great, and he's passionate, and he gives such great perspective. And I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And I'm thankful for everybody that's supportive of my role in the show. That said, you get Adam tomorrow night, so you guys can enjoy that. Thanks for joining me. Have yourselves a great week. We'll see you guys again next time. Thanks for joining me on Locked On Nuggets.